This video is how to make a very simple version of the game of Pong. I'm going to assume you're able to pause this on playback, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time waiting for someone to be able to key it in. If you need to, just pause the recording or back it up a little, replay it, whatever you need on this. So going to start off in Unity, assuming that you already have a Unity 2D project created, because this will be a 2D game. All right, so first thing we're going to need for Pong is we're going to need a ball, and I'm going to do that by right-clicking in Assets, select Create, then go down to Sprites, and select Circle. Now that will provide us a circle, which I'm going to go ahead and rename as Ball. Okay, now then I'll need something for paddles. And for paddles, I'm going to take squares and stretch them out to make them look like paddles. So Assets, right-click, select Create, down to Sprites, and select a square. And while it's here, I'm going to rename it Paddle. And yes, I will need two of those, but I'll simply drag this up in two different locations and rename them. First thing I'm going to do is get a ball up and in onto the scene, and it's a little too big of one, so I'm going to try my best to keep it a circle and make it somewhat smaller. Okay, that's going to be my ball. Notice that when I drug the asset up onto the scene, it became a part of the scene. Now this is an instance of the asset. So if anything I do to this does not affect the asset, this is just a duplicate of it to start with. All right, so I'm going to click on ball, and from prior classwork, you will know that we're going to need to put a rigid body on this and then give it a collider to work with. Okay, so I'm going to add a component, and I want this to be a rigid body, so I'll just start typing rigid body until I can get to rigid body 2D. Then once I'm there, make sure I can see all of it. And I'm going to make a change here. Dynamic, well, it is affected by Unity's physics engine. I don't want that. This time I'm going to be handling all of that, so I'll change it from dynamic to kinematic. And now then the Unity physics engine is ignored. Okay, now that gives me a body I can work with on this thing. It also needs to know if it collides with something. So I'm going to add another component, and this time I want a collider. So I just start spelling collider until I see one that I want. And since this is round, I'm going to go with the circle collider. Make sure you always pick 2D because we're working in 2D on this. Okay, now then I'm also going to expand that so I can see everything that's on it. There is one thing that we need to change in here, and that is to make the collider a trigger event. Okay, so that one is trigger. All right, and that gives me all the characteristics I need of the ball, so we should be okay there. Now let's create our paddles. Okay, first one, I think I've got a little more room over here. I'll come over here and create it just a little distance away from the edge. And once it's here, then I can change its shape to be whatever size paddle I wish it to be. And when I get through, I'm just going to try to center it over here a little bit. Now I need the same thing. It's going to need a rigid body, and it's going to need a collider. So I have paddle selected. I'm going to add a component. First one is going to be a rigid body, 2D. Again, this needs to change to kinematic. Okay. Now then I need to add a collider. And since this started off a square box collider, is 2D is what you want on this. Same thing, it needs to be a trigger event. Okay. Now, that's pretty much everything I need for a paddle. I just need another paddle. Well, I need to be careful here. I want to be able to keep up with which paddle is which. So I'm going to come up here and rename this one to be paddle right. And now that I have that named, I can come through and right click. I'm over here in hierarchy. I can right click and say I wish to duplicate this. It goes, okay, no problem. Here's a duplicate of it. Paddle right, first duplicate. Well, I need that to actually be on the left and be paddle left, so first thing I'm going to do is rename it, and it will be paddle left. And when I click off, notice it's paddle right, paddle left. Well, they're sitting on top of each other, so I can't see them right now. Well, I'll select paddle left, and that tells me that's the one that I have called paddle left, and I can just click and drag it and place it over here. I now have my two paddles. Okay, so that's the setup for the items that I need on the screen to be able to play Pong. What I need to be able to do now is to start adding script, because this game will be controlled through scripting. So I'll go back to ball, and I have my rigid body set, kinematic, simulated, collider is a trigger. Okay, now then I need some room over here, so I'm going to go ahead and minimize those, and that gives me a little more room now. Okay, I'm going to add a component to the ball, and I need to add script, and actually the easiest way to get to it is just to clear out everything up here that I was searching with and scroll to the bottom, and there is new script. So I'm going to select new script. It says, what do you want to name it? I'll call it ball script. Nothing fancy, just easy to remember, easy to recognize. Then I will create and add. Okay, once it is through creating and adding, it has added in, there's a script that's now attached to this ball, and over here it's called ball script. If I wish to see what's in it, if I click on ball script, it shows me the very basics. That's what it starts with. And if I want to change this or modify it, now's when we have to go into the C# engine. And to get into that, we double click. And let me pull that up, make sure we're seeing that on the screen. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now then in our C# script, here's the things you get. It pulls in 3 libraries. The only one we need is the Unity engine in this, so I'm going to get rid of the others. Okay, and it gives us 2 methods automatically. Now, the start is exactly what it says. When you start the game, everything within this method will be done first before anything else happens. Then, after the game is up and running, the update script will be called once per frame. Okay, so that can run pretty fast if you don't have a lot going on in your update. But we will need a couple of things to start with. So let's see, on this one, we're going to need, well, how fast do we want it to move, and which direction do we want it to move in. And so let's just create some variables, and within this class, they are going to be global within the class, simply because I'll have multiple methods that will need to see them. And this is a very contained class, so this violation of global variables, in this case, acceptable. All right, so one of the first variables I need is how fast is this thing going to be running. So let's start off, that will be a float type, and I'm going to call it speed, and I'm going to start the speed equal to 10, and I put an F on it in C# to indicate it's a floating point number. Okay, now then, next thing I will need is the direction that I want the ball to travel, and in an XY coordinate that's referred to as a vector. Every unit of time, how far on the X axis does it move, and how far on the Y axis does it move. All right, so that's going to be a vector, and this is a 2D game that we're creating, so we put 2, so we only have to worry about 2. I now have to give this a name, and this is just the direction that the ball will be moving. Okay, now then I need a X movement and a Y movement. and those will both be floats. So float, and I'll call this X movement. And I'll start that off. Yeah, let's just move 1 unit per time. And if I do 1, 1, that'll be a 45-degree angle, which is a little bit off. So for the Y, float Y movement is going to be equal to, well, let's set that to a half a unit per unit of time. And a semicolon there. Okay, so far, that's looking all right. Okay, now then, let's see if we can actually get this thing to move. Okay, so at the very beginning, I need to declare what the values are in the vector for direction. So I will, just a second, I lost me. There's me. Okay, so I'm going to start off and say that direction, well, it helps if I spell it right. D-I-R-E-C-T-I-O-N, okay, is going to be equal to a new vector, and it's a 2D vector, okay, and it's giving me problems on that vector 2. I'll look that up in just a second. Anyway, the new vector 2 is going to be made of X movement and Y movement. Okay. All right, so it took that and it likes that all right. Okay, so at the very start of the game, let's set the direction that the ball is going to be moving. Okay, so now then, for every frame, I want something to happen with this ball. That's a nice way to put it, isn't it? Something to happen with this ball. And that is that I want the ball to move in the direction and at the speed that I have going here. So I'm going to say this command is transform, and transform is the location right now. So I'm going to say transform. Okay, this is where I am right now. And I want to move. See, it's helping me out here, and I really don't want that help. Transform dot, and it keeps doing that to me. Okay, for one thing, things to notice on this, that it thinks it's a command from a different library, and so it's going to try to pull that library in. I don't want that library in. I do not wish to use that transform command. So I think I will misspell it to start with here, and I just do transform, perhaps, dot, good. Okay, so it's not going to fill it in for me. Okay, so I want the current position to be translated. So we're going to say transform. I would like you to translate, and it says, okay, exactly where am I translating to? Well, let's see, we're going to translate a particular direction. Which direction? Well, that's that vector, okay, and we're moving that direction. How much? Well, times speed. And I'm going to put something in here. If I don't, this runs so fast that when you start to run this game, it is just over and done and gone, and you can't see it. So to slow it down and to make it more consistent in what it's doing, it's helping me out again. That's just supposed to be time dot, okay, and then there's a delta time. Okay, close the parentheses and semicolon. Now then, I don't see any red on the screen, so that's a good thing. So here's what we've done. We've set up how fast to move, the direction, and this is the amount of movement. That's the vector direction for the X and Y. So we say direction is a new vector 2, moving this much X, this much Y, and at speed, which we've got right now at 10, plus this factor that you do need. If not, it's not going to run right at all. Okay, so we've got all that. Let's see if the ball does that. Okay, to do that, I have to go up here and save this thing. And I come back now and check and make sure that it's all green spots right there. And it happens to be, so we're looking pretty good there. All right, let's go back to the game now. Okay, and within this game, if I press play, right now I'm saying the ball should move in about that direction. And let's see if it does. Now, I didn't tell it to ever stop, so it will go off the screen and keep going right now, if it moves. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let me stop that and play it one more time so you get a chance to see that. Okay, and the ball does move upward to the right. Okay, so we do have ball movement going now. Okay, now the only problem is that once the ball gets to the top, it needs to bounce. Well, if my vector says go positive x, positive y, x is to the right, y is up and down. So if I'm moving in a positive y direction, when I get to the top of the screen, I need to move in a negative direction. Now here comes the fun part. Since this is able to run on any size screen, any size device, your screen area, the top of the screen and the bottom of the screen, may not be the same every time this game runs. Okay, so if I just say, all right, looks like it goes up so far, and if it gets that far, then I'll make it come down. You don't know how so far is. So we're going to have to go back into our code. We're going to have to ask Unity, where is the screen? And this is while it's running, so the screen size is known, but we've got to go get it. And so there's a command for that, and that's what we're going to go take care of next here. Okay, so let me go back into code, one step at a time. Okay, show our code. There we are. Okay, now to this we are going to add in, well, let's see. I believe on this one, I'm going to copy this to make sure I get it right, because it's a little bit longer. We're going to need a couple of variables in this as well. So let's see, new variable. Okay, I need to find out where the top of the screen is. And the way I'm going to get that will be from Unity in a vector 2. And so I'm going to call this one screen. Let's see, camel case is what I'm using. So screen top. Okay, and then I'm going to need another one to figure out the bottom of the screen. So another vector 2, and this will be screen bottom. All right, now I've got variables to hold those. Now I need to go put something in those variables. All right, so this will happen at start, because once the game starts, that's the size of the screen. I only need to do this once. So let me come in, and I'm going to paste this, and then we'll go back over it. All right. Yeah, it's long. Okay. So screen top, which is my vector 2, and remember that holds an X and a Y. Screen top is going to be equal to. All right. Unity has to convert itself from Unity units to pixels. And it, yeah, I know. But it takes care of all that for us. The problem is, if I just go ask it, hey, where is your screen top, it's going to give it back to me in pixels, and that's not usable within my code. I need it back as an X and Y, and to get that X and Y, I need it to be a vector 2. So I can say, I want to take the screen to world point, and that says take it from pixels down into things, units I can use. And I want to do that with a new vector, and screen width is the X, that's how wide it is in pixels. Screen height is the Y, that's how tall it is in pixels. But using this screen to world point, it will convert that back down into the units that I'm using inside of Unity. Okay, so I now know where the screen top is. As a matter of fact, that's going to be the top right-hand corner of the screen. So at this point, I know where the top right is, And so that means I know where the top is and I know where the right side on the wall is. Okay, so using that, let's go see if when the ball gets past the top, if we can change its direction. Okay, so I'm going to come in here and say if, okay, where is the ball? Well, the ball is the ball location can be found in transform. If I can get all that out at once. The ball's location can be found in its transform. And I want to, there it goes helping me again. That means it added cryptography up above. So I'll just type in transform, and I'll change the spelling in a minute so it won't fix that for me. And it's going to be transform position dot y. And now put a T in front of that and go get rid of the library it added in. Oh, look at it. It's been busy up here. I still only need Unity Engine. Okay. So, if transform position y is greater than the top y of the screen. And so that's going to be screen top dot, and remember it's a vector, so it has an x and y in it. Let's see, I've got one extra parenthesis there. Hit enter, and this is what I want to do if that's true. Okay. Now, transform position dot y is greater than screen. Helps if you spell them right. Okay. Greater than screen top dot y. And again, that's if the ball's y is higher than the top of the screen, is what that is saying. Okay, then if that's true, well, let me come back and look and see what variables I have to work with here. If that is true, then I can take, oh, looky there. My y movement is the one that moves it up and down, and it's been going up, which is positive, and I want that to go down. Well, if I'll think a minute ahead here, when I get to where it's hitting the bottom of the screen, I want that to go from negative back to positive. So if I'm at the top of the screen, swap that plus sign to a negative. If I'm at the bottom of the screen, swap the negative to a plus. Okay, so let me come here and make that change. Okay, so I'm going to say y movement, and I'm going to use a shortcut. It's an abbreviation that's allowed, and I'm going to say -1. All right, so what this says is take y movement, multiply it by a -1, and put it back in y movement. So it's just saying multiply y movement by -1 and keep up with the new value. Okay, well, I would want to do that if it's at the top of the screen. If it's at the bottom of the screen, I want to do exactly the same command because all that does is flip-flop the sign. So I want the same thing, sort of. Okay, so I'm going to put an OR command, and that is two pipes. That symbol is called a pipe, and so we're doing pipe, and where you will find that on a standard keyboard is the key above the enter key is a backslash, and above the backslash you have to hold the shift key down is the little pipe symbol, so that's where you'll find it. Okay, so in this I want to say transform. Oh, please don't fix it for me. It fixed it for me. Okay, let me try it again. Transform dot position dot y, yeah, I know I got to add the t there in a second, is less than. It has gone further negative than the bottom of the screen, and that would be screen bottom y value. Okay, so if my ball goes above the top of the screen or goes below the bottom of the screen, flip the sign on it. And an if syntax says you must have everything in one set of parentheses, and so I've got two conditions here, and I need to put them both within one set of parentheses. And I don't need a semicolon there because the command continues on. Okay. Now then, so far so good. All right, is there anything else I need to do with that? Oh, yes, as a matter of fact, there is one more thing I need to do with that. I have changed what I want the vector to be. So my direction now needs to change. Direction is equal to a new vector 2, and I want that composed still of x movement and y movement, but y movement has been changed. Okay. All right. So if I'm either at either one, flip the sign, set the new vector, and then move in that new vector direction at that speed and a balancing factor that's in there. Okay, again, we have to save this or it doesn't take effect. So I'm up at the top saving this. Everything's green on both sides. All right, let's go back then and see what the game is going to look like when we play this thing. Okay, there's our game, and I'm going to press play. Give it a second. Took that long for the new C# commands to come inside, be pulled in. Okay, so when I run it, hopefully now the ball will go up, hit the top of the screen, and bounce back down. Hey, and went off over to the side. Now that's something different. Remember, on the side, it's not supposed to bounce. If it goes past the paddle over here and goes off the screen, that's supposed to be a point for the other side. We'll worry about scoring in part 2. Okay, so stop this again. Now then, I need to be able to move the paddles up and down, and I need to get the ball to bounce off of that. Okay, so I've already got the paddle set up with a rigid body and a collider, and it is a trigger. Okay, so let's see what we can do here. Maybe I can go ahead and use that trigger now before I even move the paddle. So let me play that one more time. And if I remember right, the ball just naturally runs into, yes. So if I go ahead and set up collisions here, if the ball collides with this, then let's change the X direction so that it starts going back the other way. Okay, so that's where we're headed. Let's go back into our code. Okay, there's our code. And now then, I'm still in the ball script. Okay. So this is at the beginning. This is every frame. And now then I can set up one that occurs only when there's been a collision. Okay. So I'll say void. And what I want to use, remember we set it as triggers. And that trigger can set off this particular function on trigger enter to D. And I think that's supposed to be a capital O. And now then Unity is mad at me for all of the libraries I have taken out. See, I need to get rid of that one again. And so it's not helping me out much here. Okay. On trigger enter to D. Now then it's telling me. Okay. And inside this, I'm going to, well, it gives me some information that I don't particularly need, but it does give me that information. Okay, and it tells me that it collided with somebody. Okay, so I'm going to say in here, collider, is that right? Let me check real quick here. It's going to be, yeah, collider 2D. Okay, so collider 2D. Oh, now it's helping again. Okay, and what it's going to tell me is what I ran into. And so I've got to accept that information, and I just call it something solid. That's what I ran into. Okay, now, in this particular case, the only thing the ball can run into that sets off a trigger is a paddle on either end. And that's going to be a whole lot like what I did in this if. You know, it doesn't matter whether it was top or bottom, flip the sign. And on this one, on the movement of the ball, it doesn't matter which paddle I ran into, flip the sign. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to come down in here and say X movement. See, I don't have to ask, you know, did this happen? I'm only here because I did collide with something. So X movement times equal a -1. Now then set my vector, my direction to be this new vector because I've altered the direction within it. So I'm going to say direction equals new vector 2. It's kind of funny. On everything else, it's 2D, 2D, 2D. On vector, it's just vector 2. Okay, vector 2, and that's going to be my new X movement and my same Y movement. There's Y. Okay, now, what that should do for me then is whenever my ball collides with something, which the only two possibilities are one of the paddles, okay, change the X direction, reset the vector, and then keep going. Because every frame, it's going to go ahead and move whatever vector direction is pointing in. Okay, so let's save that. And now I can go back and see if I can get the ball to bounce off of the paddles. So we're going to go back and take a look at the game. So there's the game. And in the game, we're going to tell it to play. Oh, gotta wait a second. Okay, and it has now updated over here. And let's see what happens. See if the ball will bounce off of the top, bounce off the paddle. Ooh, ooh. I'd say we got something a little wrong there. Okay, but finally it didn't run into anything. And that was fun. I got to watch that again. Okay, that's working, that's working, that's not working. That's not working. Okay, all right, we have a weird problem. So we're going to stop, go back into our code, and take a look and see what could be wrong there. Okay, so let's go back into our code.